Chinese electric cars might be coming to Canada sooner than we expected. So comment down below and tell me which car you would choose to purchase if one day we would be able to buy Chinese-made electric cars here in Canada. I'm by far not a political channel. As you guys know, I talk about EVs. I like to drive EVs and all of those things related to electric cars. But I thought I'd make a video about the recent developments that have been happening around the notion that maybe one day we would be able to drive Chinese-made electric cars here in Canada. So just to give a recap here, so Canada imposed 100% tariffs on EV imports from China in October 2024. I've got my notes here just so that I get everything right. So this was in response to the same tariffs put on by the US. So both countries did it together at the same time because we as Canadians are very, very economically tied, or should I say were very economically tied to the US. As soon as we imposed those tariffs in March of 2025, China retaliated by imposing heavy tariffs and anti-dumping duties on Canadian agricultural products like canola and peas, which, if you're not Canadian, basically this is a huge blow to our prairie provinces of Saskatchewan and Manitoba, where a lot of this agricultural products are produced. So for them, not being able to sell that to one of the biggest markets in the world, which is China, was a huge problem. And then obviously, since this happened in March of 2025, this is way after the current president took office in the US, and we know what happened then. There was a lot of talk about the US coming and taking control of Canada, making us the 51st state. There was also talk about stopping any kind of trade, wanting to have all the factories in Ontario that make cars shut down and move to the US because of all the duties and tariffs that were imposed on the border, going into the US and coming into Canada. So that was a huge blow because for them, suddenly it seems that, okay, we can sell our agricultural products to the US because of these heavy tariffs. And also now the second biggest market that we had, China, is saying, well, you know what? We're going to tariff you guys too. So as you can imagine, the prairie provinces of Saskatchewan and Manitoba are very much for the government to go and start lifting EV tariffs and allowing Chinese-made EVs to enter the Canadian market. Because if they do that, then China will lift all of its tariffs on agricultural products, and then the prairie provinces will finally have an opportunity to sell goods to China. There's a lot of opposition to that. Mostly it comes from the Ontario Automotive Association and all of the factories that are currently in Ontario for manufacturers like Ford, for example. So there's a huge fear that if these cheap Chinese EVs come to Canada, and cheap here I mean in quotation marks, okay? We'll get to the pricing and all of that a little bit later, but they fear that if these cheap quote-unquote Chinese EVs come to Canada, it will make it harder for the rest of the traditional automotive market to make money and stay competitive. Which, look, I'll have my thoughts later, but I think that number one, they're not going to be as cheap as people think, and number two, competition is always a good thing, and choice is always the best, right? Because a lot of people now complain that EVs are way more expensive than they should be. Most manufacturers are focused on the top tier luxury sector and not really offering cars to the masses, which China can change if they do bring Chinese EVs to our market. And I truly don't think that Canada is going to lift all of the tariffs for Chinese EVs. I think we're going to still keep some in play. So it's not going to be a zero tariff like Australia and New Zealand are doing currently. Because Australia and New Zealand, they used to have an auto industry many, many years ago, but now they do not. I believe in 2017, that's when everything stopped in Australia and they closed down all of the factories. General Motors with Holden, Toyota, they all exited the market, and that stopped automotive production within Australia. So for them, it doesn't matter, right? Let's bring in Chinese cars without any tariffs, let them sell, because there is no internal market to protect. Whereas in Canada, we still have that internal market. So it's beneficial to kind of look at it from that perspective. But also, looking at what other regions in the world are doing, there you can also buy a Chinese EV, but how do they handle the way that EVs are brought into their countries? And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So for some current events that happened here in October, so on the 16th of October, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said he expects to meet senior Chinese leadership soon and emphasized that the Canada-China trade relationship is broader than any one sector. When asked directly whether Canada would drop the EV tariffs in exchange for relief on Canadian agricultural exports, he declined to confirm. Cool, but at least they're talking. So that's what is important. The first step is there. Then on the 17th of October, 2025, Canadian Foreign Minister Anita Anand met with her Chinese counterpart, Wang Yi, in Beijing. They discussed trade disputes, including agriculture and EVs. So there you go. It's starting to happen. Now, there was some news over this weekend, actually, when I'm filming this. Today is October 26th, that Mark Carney, our Prime Minister, has specified that he's looking towards Asia. He didn't say just China, but many other Asian nations, to kind of start building up that trade over there and not focus so much on our old trading partner, the US, which is also good news. And then after the meeting on the 17th of October, 2025, the Chinese put out a statement, and Wang Yi says China is willing to work with Canada to restart dialogue and exchanges on all levels and promote the resolution of each nation's legitimate concerns. So again, you know, it's all political talk and all of that, but for someone who is so far removed from it, and I'm not really like one guy who follows politics quite a bit, I follow it because of the EV stuff. I would say, you know, without reading too much into it, it's good news. It's something that I think a lot of us are wanting to happen, right? And if that day comes and we can purchase a Chinese EV here, why not? And the idea for doing this video was just because of some of the things I've been reading on different Facebook groups related to EVs. And one here that is based in Alberta had a lot of discussions about that. So that's what spurred me wanting to talk about it. So let's have a look first at the pricing issue. I said I'm going to talk about that at the beginning, because let's not expect Chinese EVs to be the cheapest car on the market. I don't think that's going to happen. And let's have a look at this comment from this individual and see if we agree with it or not. This person writes, people tend to romanticize Chinese EV, like they will bring some cars at a significantly lower cost. That is not all true. If you bother to research the subject and actually look at one of the markets both worlds compete, Australia, this is the situation. BYD Seal is only 2K AUD less than a comparable Model 3 at around 60K AUD price. So if they come, they will be very slightly under established brands. So do not expect car prices to come down at all, if any. I agree with this comment because I think that the prices in Canada will be similar to what is happening in Australia and New Zealand. Now, Australia and New Zealand don't have any tariffs on EVs. That's for sure. We all understand that. I'm sure Canada is going to add some tariffs there too. So then the Chinese will have to kind of be more competitive in their pricing scheme here. And also, currently all of the EV manufacturers on the market, except a few here and there, are pricing their EVs very, very high. Look at the ID Buzz from VW. It came out so expensive. Now I saw some ads saying that it's $12,000 cheaper than before. Imagine the people who bought it like a few months ago and paid full price. Now their car effectively depreciated by $12,000. It's crazy. So we already know that these prices are inflated because, well, they can inflate these prices. Why? There's no competition. There's no choice. We're stuck with a few different brands in Canada and that's it. So I don't think that Chinese EVs are going to be cheaper. So I totally agree with this comment. I also think that the benefit of them coming over here is choice and competition. We need more cars of different kind of levels and sizes, right? Right now, all of the EVs coming out are SUVs in North America, or vans like the ID Buzz. Huge cars that cost a lot of money. We need smaller vehicles, something cheaper. We need a Corolla, okay, of the EV world to come in. Sure, you can buy a used Model 3, which I would kind of call the Corolla of the EV world, really, really cheap right now. There are some 2019 models way under $20,000 Canadian that you can purchase right now and drive, and it's still a good car. But if you are looking for a brand new vehicle, there's no options. So I think, yes, I agree. Prices are not going to be as competitive as people think. They're not going to be as cheap as people think. But what it will do is it will bring competition and choice. And I think that is equally important, because over the long term of that pressure from the competition side of things, we might get better cars, better quality, diversified lineup, not just huge SUVs and trucks, but smaller vehicles, Corollas of current ICE cars in EV form. And I think that's going to be a benefit for everybody. Now let's look at another comment from the same post from another commenter who says this about Chinese EVs. We should adopt the same tariff policies as the EU. China accepts those. Seems fair. Again, I agree with this comment. Like I said already, I don't expect Canada to go zero tariff like the Australians and the New Zealanders did. So we should adapt the same way that EU does, because clearly Chinese car manufacturers are more than happy with the way that the EU has structured its tariff and import duty policy. So it looks like this. As of October 2025, which is right now, the European Union has implemented anti-subsidy tariffs on Chinese-made EVs in response to concerns over unfair trade practices. We'll get to that. These tariffs are in addition to the EU standard 10% import duty on cars. So a blanket 10% for all vehicles. Doesn't matter where they come from, 10% is added. But then for Chinese EVs, this is what it looks like. BYD gets an additional 17%. Import duty / tariff. Geely, 18.8%. Now, if you're scratching your head and like, Philip, what's Geely? Geely is a huge manufacturer. They are the owner of Polestar, Volvo, Zeekr, Lynk & Co, many different brands in China that make electric cars, traditional ICE cars. It's one of the biggest Chinese auto manufacturers, along with BYD. Next one, MG, 35.3%. Tesla, if it's made in China and goes to the EU, it is 7.8%. And then we have the other non-cooperative manufacturers get slapped with 35.3%. So this is the highest. So if you add the 10% to 35.3%, you're getting about 45.3% tariff. Less than 100, obviously, right? Still makes it attainable, still makes it a very useful way of bringing cars from China that clearly the European Union and the market there and consumers there are very happy to purchase. How are the unfair trade practices additional percentage points calculated? So these are calculated in a way where they were determined following investigation into the extent of state subsidies received by these manufacturers, which the EU deemed to distort fair competition. The tariffs aim to level the playing field for European automakers. So here it is. So basically, they calculate these extra percentage points based on how big of a subsidy Chinese car manufacturers receive in China. So then in this sense, if they get a bigger subsidy, right, the tariff here is higher, or import duty, right? And then that kind of balances things out and makes it fair for European automakers. So this model is perfect. If we can do something similar, this will still protect our homegrown car industry. Obviously, I would love for these Chinese manufacturers to come in and start taking over these factories and building EVs here in Canada to give us that competitive edge. Clearly, the US is not interested in renewable energy, is not interested in electric vehicles, is not interested in anything that the future will hold for us. So we should be the ones here to kind of take up the torch in this part of the world and start building out our EV infrastructure, not only through charging and so on, but also through manufacturing, R&D and all of that. So it would be great to see. But until then, at least these kind of percentage points would make it more feasible for us to still retain our own auto industry and have Chinese EVs come onto the market and give us a diversified field of vehicles to choose from, which is, like I said before, always nice. We don't know what the future will bring, but we can be hopeful. And for all of us EV drivers, EV owners, having more cars on the market that we can choose from is better. I, for one, don't feel like buying a truck. For some things, would like to have an SUV so that I can go for longer road trips and things like that. But a second car, I would love for it to be small and a city car. Sure, there's the Fiat 500e, there is the Mini Cooper electric, right? But that's just a few. If anything a little bit bigger than this, well, we don't have anything on the market. So hopefully these Chinese car companies can come in with something cool. And even if the pricing is not as cheap as people think, I would say most of us would go out and buy a Chinese made car, even if it's a little bit cheaper, but it has better build quality, better tech and everything else. So that's always good. I asked you guys at the beginning of the video which cars you would choose if you could buy a Chinese made car. So I'll give you guys my top 5, okay, that I think would be cool. So I'll choose one of each kind of group of cars. So if I was buying an SUV right now, I would definitely go for the Xiaomi SU7, which is amazing, okay? I'd love for that to come to Canada one day. And if it doesn't, my runner-up would be the Onvo L90, which is the cheaper cousin of the Neo. It has battery swapping, all of that good stuff. So obviously I'll put pictures up of both cars here so you guys can see what they look like. For sedans, which we don't have many of, honestly, only one that I would say is good to buy would be a Model S, even used, still a good choice. But if you're looking for a sedan, I would, for example, love to put my money down on an Xpeng P7, especially the newest one, looks amazing. The Avatar 12, which I'm hoping to drive when I go to China in March, which has very good autonomous driving capabilities. That's an awesome car. Now, the next thing is vans. So if you have a big family, you want to take all your kids on a road trip, pack all the things you need. I would say that there is 2 cars that I would go for. One would be the Zeekr 009, which is awesome. Looks cool, lots of space. And then the Li Auto Mega, which in China has 5C charging. So it's just incredible, the technology they have here. And obviously, you know, compact cars. Smaller ones, not as small as the 500e and the Mini EV. What I would say is cool would be the Neo Firefly, awesome car, great for the city, and you can take it on a road trip in a pinch if needed. The BYD Seagull is cool too. Again, small enough for the city, but also big enough that you can take it on a road trip. And then finally, for all these guys who love their trucks, they do have full electric trucks. The cool ones are the Geely RD6 and the Maxus T90. I'll put pictures up here as well. Cool trucks, they look nice. And then finally, I think something that many people overlook, and I'm starting to see that it's a good transition vehicle, and especially a good vehicle for certain parts of Canada. Like where I live in Alberta, the infrastructure for charging is not built up at all. So we need cars that have a petrol engine to kind of support, maybe charge the battery, but not fully rely on the battery running the wheels, as they say. However, there is one PHEV that I would buy if I was looking for a truck, but I don't want to get an F-150. So that would be the BYD Shark. Pretty cool. And from the videos I watched from Australia in the outback, it's a beast. It can do everything that the Australians need. So that's awesome. And then for me, the coolest thing is the EREV cars, okay? So basically, the petrol engine does not power the wheels. It only acts as a generator. So it's kind of similar to the old BMW. What was it? The BMW i3, I think it was? Maybe I'm wrong. I'll put up a picture here. So for me, this is cool technology, and the Chinese made it so that it's even better, and they put in bigger batteries too. So you're getting amazing range, right? So if you can't charge, just fill it with petrol and you're good. So my number 1 pick here is the Li Auto L9, and the equivalent of the Chinese Hummer, or sorry, the equivalent of the US Hummer in China would be the M Hero 917, which is freaking bonkers. It's an awesome car. So yeah, EREVs I think also would sell quite well here in Canada, just because of the way that our country is, and you can't find good charging infrastructure everywhere. So those are some of my picks. Tell me in the comments which one you would buy if Chinese EVs came to Canada. That was a high-level overview of what's going on with the Chinese EV situation here in Canada. I'm hopeful that our Prime Minister Mark Carney starts these talks, continues these talks, and there's going to be some sort of resolution at the end that our farmers in Saskatchewan and Manitoba are able to then start selling their agricultural products in China without any tariffs, that we are able to get these Chinese EVs here and at least, I don't say flood the market with cheap stuff, but provide us with options and choice. We all want choice. So let me know, guys, what do you think in the comments below? Would you buy an EV from China? If so, again, I'll ask you, which one would you buy? Do you think this is a good idea? Should we be looking at different trading partners in Asia to bring over all these cool technologies that we never had access to and kind of build our future too of renewable resources, of the way that EU is doing in some of the countries there, right? Or even Norway, right? That has a pretty big petrol industry, and they are putting a lot of effort into renewables, and you know, EVs are prominent over there. So for me, it's a win-win, but let me know what you guys think. I definitely would want to buy a Chinese EV as soon as they're available. And I'm going to be in March of 2026. So in a couple of months, actually, I'm going to China. This time it's going to be for almost 4 weeks. I'm going to try to drive as many Chinese or new EVs as possible and bring you some cool content from there as well. So thanks again for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think about Chinese EVs in Canada, and I will see you on the next one. Take care. Bye.